Welcome back to Cycle Wisdom, where we empower women to restore natural menstrual cycles to improve health and promote fertility. I'm your host, Dr. Minjeur, and I'm so glad you're listening today. On today's episode, we're going to be talking all about charting apps. We're going to break it down and talk a little bit about the building blocks of charting apps, which will help you to understand why I make the recommendations that I do. We will learn that not all apps are created equally, and I will make suggestions on how to get connected with a charting app that will work best for your particular needs. So, as always, let's get started with a patient story about a client of mine who we'll call Nellie. Now, she came to see me when she was about 25 years old. She was newly married, and she and her spouse were planning to avoid pregnancy for a while, as they were both in graduate school. I asked what their plans were for charting her cycles, as I knew she was trying to stay off of hormonal birth control. And Nellie told me, "I've got it all figured out. I'm using this charting app that came on my phone. It's a part of tracking my health, and it tells me when I can get pregnant or not based on my fertility." Now, this is a very common response that I get, so I asked Nellie to show me the app that she was using. And we were able to talk through why this particular charting app was not particularly effective at preventing pregnancy. More importantly, I showed her that it didn't really give her the level of detail that she would need to effectively avoid a pregnancy with great efficacy, since that's where she was trying to focus her intentions. We also discussed that this charting app would not be able to evaluate long-term if there were other problems going on with her menstrual cycle that may signal a concern that should be addressed prior to achieving pregnancy in the future. As part of our follow-up plan, I got Nellie started with one of our charting instructors, and she learned how to chart her cycles first on paper. Once she was comfortable with this, she was able to transition to using an app that was supported by the particular charting method she was using. By charting her cycles based on what she was observing daily with the method she learned, it actually reflected accurately her days of fertility. Nellie was able to document with great accuracy what else was going on with her menstrual cycles, as well as her ovulation pattern, to obtain a better understanding of her overall health, as well as to track her fertile window. This allowed her to be able to avoid a pregnancy, and also she knew when the right time would be to utilize fertile days when she wanted to get pregnant in the future. Now, Nellie's story is not uncommon, and probably more than half of the women that I see in my practice come into me with some sort of experiencing using some sort of an app to chart their cycles. However, what I oftentimes find is that women don't understand the difference between the many different charting apps that are available out there, and why it's important to be utilizing an app that tracks other fertility signs other than just the start of your menstrual cycle. So let's back up a little bit and start with a little bit of a history lesson. Now, there are multiple different charting systems of fertility awareness methods that are available. One of the first methods that was created is called the rhythm method, which can also be known as calendar method, and more recently has been called standard days method. Now, the rhythm method, as I will refer to it throughout the rest of this episode, was developed back in the 1930s, so almost 100 years ago at this point in time. And really, the rhythm method relies on a couple of different things. The first thing is that your cycles are regular, which means that periods are occurring somewhere between 26 to 32 days. And the second thing is that relies upon the consistency of your cycles every single cycle. Now, what this method does is to predict a window of ovulation from days 8 through 19 every month, and that is identified as your fertile window. Again, the way we count this is day 1 is the first day of your menstrual cycle. We count forward to day 8, that's your fertile window, through until day 19. Now again, this relies heavily on the fact that you're having a normal cycle, but it also relies on the fact that ovulation is occurring normally, that you don't have any other underlying hormone abnormalities, and that you have a consistent luteal phase from the time you ovulate until your next period starts. Now, because of these requirements and what we know about women's cycles in the general population, the rhythm method is actually only about 75% effective at avoiding pregnancy. Now, that's not terrible, but if you are using this particular method by identifying your fertile window and avoiding intercourse from days 8 through 19, only 75% of the time you can actually avoid pregnancy. However, this also means that 25% of the time, it's not going to be effective at preventing pregnancy. This means that you can be fertile outside of days 8 through 19, and there is a possibility of getting pregnant outside of those set days. And this is really one of the main reasons that we don't consistently recommend or teach the rhythm method anymore, because a 25% pregnancy rate, if you're intending to avoid pregnancy, is not considered to be very effective. Interestingly enough, when I was taught about fertility awareness methods in medical school, the rhythm method was the only option that was taught to us. So no wonder fertility awareness methods are not recommended by most doctors. For comparison's sake, the newer fertility awareness-based methods that are available that actually track your ovulation and your daily biomarker observations approach 98 to 99% efficacy as far as pregnancy prevention, if that is your intention during that cycle. The reason this becomes so important is that so many of the apps that are available out there are based on the rhythm method. Because of this, these apps are using technology that is only 75% effective at identifying when your fertile window is, and it doesn't account for the daily and monthly changes that can be happening in your cycle. One way to know if this is how your app works is that if you plug in the first day of your period and the app is already predicting when your ovulation is going to happen later that month, you are likely using an app that is based on the rhythm method. These apps do not typically have the ability to account for what's happening from day to day in your cycle. The other thing you can always evaluate is that most apps will have somewhere in the developer notes if it is actually based in a particular fertility awareness-based method and which method that is. So again, you want to look for anything that would say calendar method or standard days or rhythm method. I would typically steer away from those particular apps because they are predictive apps rather than actual observation-based apps. One of the big reasons this is really important is we know that even in women who have normal cycles that are a normal length, there can be significant cycle-to-cycle variability. So for example, as I'm evaluating women's charting of the newer methods where they are tracking their actual day of ovulation and looking at all of their biomarkers, we can see that maybe this month, this particular woman ovulated on day 18. The prior month, she ovulated on day 12, and the month before that, she ovulated on day 24. The reality is that all of those numbers as far as the day of ovulation can be normal without having any hormone abnormalities. However, if you'll notice, one of those days did fall outside of that standard days method of day 8 to 19 of fertility. This is why it's important to be able to correctly identify when that ovulation is happening, as well as the fertile window that surrounds that day of ovulation, which can be different for every cycle. The other thing is we know there are many things that can throw off when your ovulation is happening. Perhaps you are typically someone who has a very normal cycle that comes every 28 days like clockwork. But this month, you have a stressful situation in your house. Perhaps you have a kid who's sick and is awake overnight multiple nights in a row. Or maybe you have a stressful situation happening at work. We know that physical or emotional stressors in your life can throw off your time of ovulation by days or even weeks at a time. Your body is amazing when it does this because it's your body's way of saying, hey, this is not a good time to get pregnant because of all the stress in your life. Stress can actually delay ovulation and give the appearance in your charting of what we call a double peak. And so when you have a double peak, it doesn't actually mean that you ovulate twice in a cycle. It means that your body gears up like it's going to ovulate, but then it doesn't actually ovulate at that time, and you may ovulate later on in the cycle or not at all. The stressors can be something that happens as early as when your period starts that cycle during the time when the follicle is developing to be released later on. If you're using an app that is just predictive based on rhythm method, it's not going to take into account those day-to-day stressors that may be occurring in a particular cycle. So what should you do instead? The great news is that you aren't just confined to chart on paper forever. Most of the newer fertility awareness methods that I recommend do have apps that go along with guided instruction. These would include Creighton model, FEM, Marquette method, symptothermal, and Chart Neo. The difference is that I always recommend to get education first with a charting instructor. And the reason we say this is that no app is perfect. There is no single piece of technology that can tell you everything that you need to know. You should utilize the charting app as a tool to monitor your observations, but you first need to learn and understand the nuances of the particular method you are using in order for it to be more effective. This is why it's incredibly important to work with a trained professional who is able to teach you how to chart your cycles, rather than just picking up any random charting or health app and thinking that that can be 100% effective at achieving your goals. Imagine if you could still use an app to chart your cycles, but in a way that had 98 to 99% accuracy and efficacy for avoiding pregnancy if that's your intention. Pair this up next to one that has most apps out there having only 75% efficacy. What if your charting app was also able to identify problems regardless of your fertility status? Which type of app would you choose? Seems like a pretty clear answer to me, and I hope this will help you identify the differences between the different charting apps that are out there. I know it can seem confusing, but our team is here to help. If you're ready to work with our elite team of healthcare professionals, go to our website, radiantclinic.com, to schedule a free discovery call with me and learn more about our package-based pricing for healthcare. We are currently able to see people for medical appointments in the Cedar Rapids, Iowa area, or can arrange for a telehealth visit if you live in the state of Iowa. Thank you so much for listening to this episode. Please share this podcast with someone in your life who would benefit from our services. Remember to subscribe to this podcast for more empowering content. I sincerely appreciate your support, and I look forward to sharing more with you on our next episode of Cycle Wisdom.